OM606. No lag. Doesn't need an intro. Hi everyone, today we're going to be doing some testing. What difference does a quick spool valve really make? What horsepower differences can a quick spool valve make? What kind of differences does it make running a supercharger versus no supercharger? What kind of extra power do we get under the curve? How does that transmission perform? What kind of losses do we get from it? Oh yes, new pulley on the supercharger, bigger or smaller, what kind of differences will that make? Taking this air switchover box off and on, what kind of difference will that make? Control methods for the test for the day: billet 8.5mm pump used throughout. It's set at 150cc max fuel. The wastegate is going to be capped because we know the S300 doesn't need that wastegate. I have a wastegate fitted to this setup because I intend to do lots of crazy mad burnouts and stuff, and I want to take a bit of load off the engine. You do need a wastegate on things that are smaller than S300s though, so don't think that you don't need a wastegate on your turbo, because you really do. You don't on this turbo with this setup. Let's have a go. Let's see what happens. First test, turbo only, no quick spool valve connected. So quick spool valve vane open so it can't aid the turbo to spool up. Second test, turbo only with quick spool valve working. What's the next run? What's the next run?
No airbox.
No air flap.
Yeah, and box.
Yo, boy. Third test, we're gonna try the quick spool valve turbo only and this box removed, so there's no restriction to the inlet of the turbo. Airbox made no difference either way because those air filters are really good. Buy one today. This is the exciting bit.
Excited.
Supercharger. So, supercharger time. We're going to do big pulley first because everybody likes a big pulley, don't they? Which makes the supercharger go slow. Slow because Gale Banks tells us that making the supercharger go slow. Why won't it go on? Where's Gale when you need him? Gale Banks tells us that bigger pulley, slower supercharger speed, and colder temperatures make more power. And I don't doubt that he's right. But I think my big pulley is a bit big. So let's do a run now. Supercharger, quick spool valve working, turbo all set up and connected. 150cc, see what it sounds like, see what figures we get, and then I've got a special small pulley for you. Fourth test is going to be turbo setup all connected and supercharger running, so 10 rib pulley on the blower.
With quick spool?
We shall assume that all supercharger runs are with quick spool valve working. Quick spool valve, big pulley on the supercharger, let's go. just made 411 wheel and 606 pounds-feet. Obviously still on 150cc, so now we're pulling the belt off. Right, so it's swap over the supercharger time. So the supercharger, when the flat box opens and relieves the pressure off the supercharger, we're finding that the supercharger is only pulling 5 horse out of the overall power of the engine.
And that's right at the top end.
Yeah, right at the very top end. However, the power under the curve between 2,000 and 4,000 is like 120 horse difference. It's mega. So I can't wait to drive this. This is going to feel phenomenal. Size difference, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think that's going to make a difference? I think you're going to get a slightly more whiny supercharger with this one than this one. I don't think that it's clever to put this smaller pulley on. This is research purposes, and we're doing things professionally today.
And then we'll decide.
Whether
it was clever.
When we know the results, then we'll make the prediction.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. I don't want to put more Loctite on the bolts because
Why don't you just put one bolt in?
Did you notice how I've changed them to Torx instead of Allen's? Because Allen's just round off straight away.
Allen!
Fifth test is going to be turbo setup, all connected with the supercharger with a smaller supercharger pulley. Are we going to get some sexy noises? Let's go through a couple of combinations. So this is S300 only, so no supercharger running, not even connected, S300 turbo only. It's a twin scroll housing, but it's running on a single scroll manifold, and because, well, they do run much better as an open housing for some reason. If you run an S300 on a twin scroll, it makes less power. Don't know why. Anyway, I think it's just the housing design or the combination. But look at this. So this is your power with an S300. Not really ideal. Yes, big loose torque converter, and you can make it work. But you can see your power's sort of coming in real late. That's 4,000 revs. So your power peak is, you know, sort of 5,000, whatever. You're starting to defuel your pump by that point, right? So that's S300 on its own with no help, no quick spool valve, no supercharger, no nothing. Right, look at this. That is the difference between quick spool valve and no quick spool valve on an S300. That is the difference. So the people that say, it doesn't make a difference, doesn't work, blah, 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 that is the difference right there. And notice also that the power is higher. And then, well, that doesn't even make any sense. Yes, it does. It does make sense because the pump was already starting to defuel. The governor was starting to pull in. The turbo was so laggy and so late that the pump was starting to pull the fuel back. It was getting to the end of its rev range, so it didn't get to make its full potential. Yes, under load, it would have made more potential, and potentially under load, if you put them both on a retarded setting, it might make a little bit. Well, no, it won't make more. It might make the same because it is the same. It's an open housing. So look at that. That is a big difference. Let's use 200 horsepower an example. So we take that line at 200 horsepower. So it made 200, well, this is wheel horsepower, with the quick spool valve at 4,100 revs. Still pretty bad, but it's a lot better than at 4,600 revs.
Wow.
500 RPM difference in spool time to 200 horse. That's a massive difference. So that's the difference between your quick spool valve, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to, should we compare the next one to the quick spool valve or the non-quick spool valve?
Well, it makes more sense to compare it to the
quick spool valve because we would use a quick spool.
Yeah.
We'll take away the non-quick spool valve because we aren't going to be the kind of guy that uses an S300 without a quick spool valve. Now this is...
Well, I wouldn't.
This is with the supercharger. This is with the Ken Bell supercharger running a big pulley at only 8 psi. Look at this. Look at that. That is massively different. Peak power is slightly less. So running the big pulley on the Ken Bell, we went from 416 wheel to 411 wheel. So we lost
No, we didn't.
We lost like 4 point something, right? About 4 horsepower. We lost 4 horsepower going supercharged. So that great big supercharger, there's no magnetic clutch. It's just a passive valve that stops the supercharger being able to apply pressure when the turbo kicks in. So the supercharger gets relieved, but it's still been driven by the engine. And that cost us 4 horsepower. 4 horsepower, right? So to avoid the mechanical complication of having a clutch and all the other systems that I would have to design, I've lost out on 4 horsepower. Okay, we can live with that, right? But look at this. The power under the curve is absolutely massively different. Like, massively different. Look at this. I mean, this shows the transition between the supercharger doing its thing and the turbo coming on. Look how much quicker the turbo came on. This, as the graph increases, is where the turbo takes over. But look at the difference. That happened at 3,700 revs. This is turbo, remember? Turbo doing its thing, right? It's 3,700 revs with the supercharger's help. Without the supercharger's help, to make that same 240 horsepower, 4,300. So 600, we gained another 600 RPM spool time. So the quick spool valve gave us 500, and then another 600 by making the supercharger blow into the turbo. That's amazing. So that's just made our turbo more efficient. You know, we're in a better range. So that's amazing, right? But that isn't the main point. The main point is this. Section here is what makes a 606 a little bit difficult to live with, and that's why we recommend not going for S300 turbos. Yes, we love the horsepower, but we don't love the off boost. It's an NA engine until that turbo kicks in. So this is what we get without, and then this is with. So that supercharger is literally just giving us, I mean, each one of these lines is equivalent to 20 horsepower. So let's take this area here at about 2,800 revs. So we've got 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120 horsepower more at 2,800 revs. Let's take it right down.
At the wheels?
At the wheels, yeah, at the wheels. Let's take it right down to 2,000 revs. At 2,000 revs, 20, 40, 60, 80, just over 80 horsepower difference at 2,000 revs. That's massive, absolutely massive.
Do you know the bit that's more impressive than that? Is look at how long you sat on the difference between the 20 horsepower.
Well, the instantaneous, when I hit the pedal, the instantaneous, that's your throttle response right there. When you boom, wham, and it like revs up, that's that. And that's that instant, whoa, and then it increases. Whereas with this, you get a, and then doesn't really increase. You know, it stays the same. Whereas that is just a, I love that. I love that. Right, now let's have a look at something else that's exciting, right? So this, by the way, is 45 PSI, is what it made with the bigger pulley, 45 PSI peak. And to give you an idea, throughout the range, I'm really sorry that the boost isn't laid out on this screen, but as usual, I've got a problem with my dyno, and I'm in the process of getting it fixed. It was made not in the UK, so fixie isn't very easy, but I recorded it on camera and you'll see it. But 8 PSI, that's what the supercharger was giving it. So this difference between this and this is from 8 PSI of clean, cooled, intercooled air. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. 8 PSI of clean, cool, intercooled air from that Ken Bell supercharger. Don't think that your tiny little stock turbo at 8 PSI is going to make that difference, because it won't. And why won't it? Why won't it? Because everybody says, well, a bar's a bar. No, it's not. We know why it's not, because if your stock small turbo was making that 8 PSI, the resistance on the exhaust side may be 8 PSI. It will be bottlenecking the outlet of the engine. So 8 PSI on your small turbo isn't going to give you the same gains that 8 PSI on a Ken Bell with no exhaust restriction. What you'll notice if you watch the gauges as that thing goes up, the actual exhaust manifold pressure stays at 0. So as the supercharger's pushing the turbo and accelerating it, it's making the turbine wheel suck the exhaust gas out of the engine. It's like an extraction system, which is just like immense. So yeah, 8 PSI and 8 PSI ain't equal. I once watched a video by a man in the super turbo community that said, a bar is a bar. No, it's not at all. You've got to consider your exhaust side because it makes a massive difference. It's like having a cork in one end. Anyway, we digress. So let's have a look at what happens with a small pulley. Small
Take that
pulley.
one off first,
What
then.
we're going to do? Are we going to take off the?
Yeah.
We'll
No,
take
no,
off the non-supercharged. So we've got big pulley supercharged, and then we're going to go small pulley supercharged. So that is your small pulley supercharger. Look at that for a difference. So we thought
It's the
that
same again.
we thought that the first difference was massive, which it was. But look at that. That is absolutely insane. Like, absolutely insane. It's so much that the turbo doesn't even show a transition point. And this, to give you an idea, is about 15 PSI, right? So I want you to show me with your stock turbo, because a bar's a bar, I want you to show me 15 PSI a boost making 300 wheel horsepower through a 4L80. It ain't going to happen. That is absolutely... Oh, and at what revs, by the way? 300 wheel horsepower at 3,000 revs. That's amazing. So look at the difference. However, hands up now. We start to lose power at the top end. Because that supercharger has been driven much harder, spun much harder, and it's creating a parasitic loss on the engine. So we've actually now started to lose a bit of power. So we've gone from 411.9, so let's say 412, to 394.9. 17 horsepower we lost, but we gained this under the curve, which is just, amazing. I mean, you got to think that, let's take for example like an S200 turbo kit, which is one of my absolute favourite turbo kits. It still remains my favourite turbo kit, but if we take that, we would usually see an S200 turbo kit to start to kick about 3,000 on the dyno, maybe a little bit after, but because obviously the dyno's not like a road, but we'll see it kick about 3,000. So we would have had nothing, and then a kick. So we've gained like, well, we're at 300 horsepower where we would normally have had very little, like 45, 50 horsepower. Absolutely insane. The amount more pain on this engine is like serious.
It's the torque curve that blows my mind in a second.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Right. Okay. So what we could do is let's take away, just to give us all a bit of fun. Let's take away the previous supercharged run, and we'll put this is an S300 without the supercharger versus the Kemble 2.8 litre with a small pulley, and that gain is just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Let's put on there the engine torque. Let's have a look at the difference. Let me take off the wheel power. Look at the difference of the torque. Wow. So with the supercharged version, we maintained for a really long period of time. I'm talking like from, well, let's say from 2,400 revs all the way up to sort of 4,200. We maintained over 600 pounds-foot of torque. That's a lot. That's a lot from low down. That's good. For an engine that likes to rev to the moon, that's really good. However, without, we maintained around about 170. So we gained like 425 pounds-foot of torque over a large part of the rev range. It's amazing. So, do I like the supercharger? Yes, very, very much. Is the supercharger good? Yes. Is that supercharger expensive? Yes. That's like an 8,000 quid supercharger, 8,000 Great British pounds. That's about 10,000 euros and about 12,000 US dollars. It's a really expensive supercharger. You might be able to buy the supercharger only on its own cheaper, because that's part of a Mustang GT500 kit, I believe.
This is still with 150 cc's of fuel.
Yes, yes. So, can we get more power? Of course we can. This is a controlled test. This whole thing is a controlled test at 150cc, and you can see the rev limits aren't high either. I've kept that nice and low. One, because I want the engine to live when I'm doing big burnouts. There's nothing clever about having a stupid high RPM range, especially if you're making monster power like that down low. Wheel figures, wheel figures. I dread to think if I actually put on the engine power, might have to trim this, but engine power versus, let's take the engine torque away. Yeah, so we've got an engine power peak of 646 horsepower. We're in that 600 horsepower range. These boxes are hellish inefficient, but they give us such gains in torque and drivability that it's well worth it. We've learned quite a lot today, haven't we? So we've got a few things, we've got a few directions we can go in next. We can whack the fuel up and see what it'll make, but I don't think the smaller pulley's really like the right thing for that.
No.
I think that if you wanted to just see what it'd make, you'd be doing it on the bigger pulley because it's less loss, and or on turbo with quick spool valve. Because I think that if you wanted to make ultimate power, you want a great big turbo with a quick spool valve. So, I think we should now find out if it'll do burnouts.
Yep.
And how gloriously it'll do burnouts.
With the small pulley on. Jesus Christ.